Hello, Bjarni Thomas. Please introduce yourself to my audience. Who are you and what are you about?
My name is Bjarni. I'm an independent filmmaker. I'm a stand-up comedian, and recently I've been dabbling in publishing books in Iceland.
No kidding.
Nope.
Wow. All right, so how did you link up with Lloyd Kaufman and the Troma family?
I grew up watching The Toxic Crusaders, which was the cartoon version of the Toxic Avenger that was made in the early 90s. I grew up in Sweden, so I was watching that in Sweden. And when I was 10, I realized that The Toxic Crusaders was based on a movie called The Toxic Avenger. And I watched that, and after that, I fell in love with his entire filmography. When I was 13, I was moderating a pretty big horror website at the time called Slasher Dome. It's unfortunately the records have been erased from history on that, but it was pretty big at the time. And we interviewed people like Lloyd Kaufman, we interviewed Gunnar Hansen, people from the Friday the 13th movies. We interviewed all the Jasons, and that's sort of how I sort of started contacting Troma. And I would send like fan letters to Michael Hers and to Lloyd Kaufman, the two owners of Troma and creative directors. And when I was 14, I was sort of pushing the idea of trying to help them find distribution in Iceland, because they didn't really have distribution in Iceland. And how that sort of ended was that they did a retrospective in Iceland at the local independent cinema, where they showed 6 Troma movies, and Lloyd came to Iceland. So at the time, and I got to play Toxie during that event.
Oh, wow.
And I was 15 at that time, and I was also working on my own independent, I was working on my first feature-length movie that I was directing myself, called Night of the Living Dead with a K, about a knight and Viking that sort of die and get resurrected. And so I got Lloyd to do a cameo as my drunken dad that sort of molests me, because that's the humor I was in at the time, very Troma inspired and Internet Flash inspired, and the rest is history. He was working on Poultrygeist at the time, and I was 15, so I was working on my own movie, so I was way too young to just fly out and help him. But the moment I was 18, I started going to the U.S. I worked on a movie called The Vampires of Zanzibar when I was 18, which was filmed in Virginia. But I told Lloyd that the next movie he'd work on, I'd definitely fly over to work on it. And that wouldn't be until 2012, when he did Return to Nukem High. So I went and lived in Buffalo, in Niagara Falls, where they filmed the movie. Lived there for a couple of months and helped them out. But before that, I did do a stint as an intern in 2008. After I did Vampires of Zanzibar, I lived in New York for a while, and I was an intern at Troma. I helped them with the DVDs. And you can actually see me if you get the DVD for Getting Lucky, which is a great Troma movie about a guy who finds a leprechaun stuck in a beer bottle, and he has to give him 3 wishes to get out of the beer bottle. I appear in the introduction for that, the DVD introduction, because if you've seen the Troma movies, they always do these wacky introductions with Lloyd. And in the introduction for Getting Lucky, he's getting drunk, and he finds the leprechaun still stuck in the beer bottle, and he wishes to get lucky. And this beautiful Tromette shows up, and he gets really angry until she changes into me.
Okay, that's a good time. Good time. So tell people about other film production that you have done.
Well, yeah, I've worked on a couple of movies here in Iceland, where I'm usually stationed at. I was raised in Sweden, but I moved to Iceland at a very young age, and it's sort of my home base. That's where my own company is located at. But every year I try to go to the States and either hang with people or film something. But I've done a couple of projects on my own. I filmed a couple of movies here in Iceland. 2 of them have gotten re-released by a company called Video Hoarder, who released them on VHS of all things. So you might be able to find a copy of Night of the Living Dead and the movie I did the year after that called Clowny and the Satanic Cult on VHS. That actually they are Video Hoarder is going to release them, I think maybe on DVD and Blu-ray as well as like a double feature. So stay tuned for that.
That's exciting.
Yeah, they're really really bad like proto Troma movies. Just just bunch of gore. It's like if you've seen Chris Seaver, the guy who did Filthy McNasty and Mulva Zombie Ass Killers, like very Troma inspired, but a little bit worse. Troma. But yeah, so those movies are getting re-released for some reason, so you should check them out. I did a couple of movies with John Birmingham, who did he did two movies with Troma, one called Crazy Animal, which I was the post-production advisor on, and another one called Rednecks, which I was actually the producer on. And then in between those movies, he did a movie called The Vampires of Zanzibar, which I'm an associate producer, and I play a character called Jacob, who is this sort of comic book nerd. And the movie Vampires of Zanzibar is a movie about like it happens during this one crazy night where vampires rise up and sort of take over the town. And I play this comic book nerd called Jacob who gets bitten and becomes sort of like the general, one of the generals in the vampire army. And the fun thing about that is that I play my parents. It's like it's sort of a Jerry Lewis-esque sort of thing where there's a scene where I wake up both my parents. So they do a close-up and it's both me. And then I've done a couple. I worked on a movie called Reykjavik Whale Watching Massacre, known in the States and other places as Harpoon, which is a pretty big budget for Iceland movie. It's a slasher movie which had Gunnar Hansen in it, and you can barely see me in the movie. I was mostly doing behind-the-scenes stuff on that. Just I was sort of Gunnar Hansen's assistant and production assistant. And I'm in a movie called I'm in a couple of Icelandic movies. One called Dorks and Damsels, where I play one of the customers. It's like an Icelandic version of Clerks. I did a movie called Black's Game, which is this take on Iceland's history with drug dealing, and I play a guy called Albert, the guy who moves the drugs from Denmark to Iceland. And I've done a couple of other Troma projects. I did a movie called Wrath of the Blood Angel, directed by Justin Morales, and my most recent feature that I've worked on is Shakespeare Shitstorm, the new Troma movie, which is based on The Tempest by William Shakespeare. And if you know The Tempest, this typhoon sort of shows up and makes everyone, takes the boat and puts them on this island. And in the movie, it's a literal shitstorm. The whales start shitting in the ocean and it becomes a shit typhoon, and they get stranded in Tromaville. And I get the honor of playing the captain on the ship. And I have two great scenes in that movie.
Well, that's exciting.
Yeah.
Wow, that's quite extensive. That's a lot of work in production for a man. How old are you?
Well, I'm 30 now. It was more impressive when I was 15 years ago.
Well, it's still more than most people. So I think people will be interested in hearing some of those movies. And I have a hard time believing that your movies can be worse than non-Lloyd Kaufman Troma movies. Because
well, yeah.
Generally, those are terrible.
There are a couple of movies that Troma released that, because I sent them Night of the Living Dead, and they sent me a really nice rejection letter. But the movies they were actually releasing at the time, I can't say what movies they were because I'm actually friends with the directors.
Sure.
But I saw them and I was like, well, mine's better than that. I will admit that I thought that, but I won't say which ones.
Fair enough. So. What are people into when they hear you do stand-up comedy?
What are they into?
Yeah, what can they expect?
They expect a lot of social commentary, a lot of pop culture references. I do get a lot of woke. Sometimes there's a lot of woke people in the audience. When I say woke, I don't mean like woke on maybe gender studies, but I mean like woke on conspiracy theories. And
yes,
they often come up to me and like shake my hand and say thank you for doing that. Was like specifically for me. Like they feel like I'm talking specifically to them, and they feel really happy that someone's bringing up bringing attention to a lot of wacky conspiracy theories because I grew up with a nice array of friends, and a big part of my stand-up is sort of just telling stories about being in that circle, smoking weed and talking about how the world really works, and a lot of it's really funny, because I do have like a joke about a friend of mine once told me there's a very big conspiracy theory about like Adolf Hitler surviving World War II, and the boys in Brazil sort of like living in South America. And I remember when somebody told me about that, I was like, yeah, I've heard about that conspiracy theory. He survived the firebombing of Berlin, went to Argentina, and died there in the 60s. And he just interrupts me and goes, "No, Hitler's still alive." So I make a joke about like, the idea that, he was born in 1890, that would make him 130 years old. And just, the idea, like, could you imagine being Adolf Hitler and you've broken the world record for being the oldest man in the world? You can't call Guinness.
But you would call yourself like an info warrior. Maybe you get along with the info warriors, but how would you identify your own beliefs?
That's a good question. I mean, I don't know if I would necessarily call myself info warrior is a nice term and all, but I don't know if I would call myself that because I definitely don't agree with everything Alex Jones says.
Right.
It's hard to really put. I'm what my friends and fans would say. I would just say I'm a contrarian, basically. Like if everyone goes one direction, I will go the other one, just for the sake of argument. I'm the devil's advocate. So like I will debate if people are saying like, oh, we have to go into Syria to take down Assad. I will go, why? And it will go to the extent that instead of being just against the war, I'll just go all the way pro-Assad, at least in the argument, just so someone's standing up for him, So that's sort of my way of arguing. I would say that my core beliefs are basically question everything, never take anything for granted. I would say there's only one truth. And nobody knows what that one truth is. People say, well, there's multiple truths. But no, there's multiple perceptions, multiple perspectives. But there's only one truth. Either it happened or it didn't, as Bertrand Russell would always say. So we have to figure out what that one truth is. And while we're doing that, we have to be open to every single suggestion and sort of decipher what happened, how it happened, and why. So the only thing I'm really when it comes to a political alignment, the only thing I really stand on is I'm anti-war. That's like my main thing. Like, I have a lot of left-wing opinions. I have a lot of right-wing opinions. I'm spiritual, but I'm all over the place religiously. It's just the idea that, be open for everything. If it works, we should accommodate it. If it doesn't, we shouldn't. Like, if something's been proven to work throughout history, then we should do it. If it doesn't, then we shouldn't do it. And I call it I want to call it rationalism.
Got it.
The main thing is, just be anti-war. Like I don't think there's any reason why another person has to die for our beliefs. And there's a great Silver Surfer quote, which is, if holy places will be vacant of war, then make all places holy. If holy men don't have to fight in wars, then make all men holy. The most beautiful thought in my head is the idea of these two armies facing each other, and they just throw down their guns because they realize there's no reason, there's no opinion that's strong enough that you would have to kill another human being to get that opinion across.
Beautiful. All right, that's a perfect segue. Tell me about your work with Marvel Comics.
Yes, I was very lucky to get a meeting with Marvel when I was in New York before we started filming Shakespeare Shitstorm. And what I wanted to do is, because Marvel Comics they have a really big flow here in Scandinavia. They release all the comics in Sweden and Norway and Denmark and Finland. And for a very long time, we would get Iceland is a very small country, so we don't really make deals with the big cheese. We back in the day, Iceland would just literally publish whatever Denmark was publishing, because before 1940, Iceland was under Denmark's rule. So we still sort of had a lot of business agreements that just didn't disappear. So, like Donald Duck, we released the comics. Like Donald Duck is huge in Europe. I mean, like we have Italian artists, we have Spanish artists, we have all these different people releasing different types of Donald Duck comics. But the only ones we get are the ones that Denmark republishes. And it was the same with Spider-Man and Superman and Batman and X-Men. Sort of that if Denmark published it, we would just sort of just take what they were publishing and translate it from Danish to Icelandic. And all those companies sort of went under in the early 90s. So I grew up in Sweden, and I was reading a lot of Marvel comics and a big fan. And when I came to Iceland, I could only, if I wanted to read it in Icelandic, I would have to go to a flea market to get them. So when I became old enough, it was always a dream of mine to be a publisher. I've self-published my own comic books, one called Bloodshed, another called Death is a Junkie. But the idea always was that wouldn't it be great to republish Spider-Man and other Marvel comics in Icelandic? Because Iceland is a very small country. Icelandic is a very small language. And with every generation, like I've worked with kids, and something I've noticed is that like it's hard for them to sometimes they just won't read. And I remember like I loved reading comic books as a kid, and you know their English isn't getting better, but they're not getting better in Icelandic either. So like if they go see a movie that's in English and they don't understand English, they will ask you like what's going on in the movie, and you'll tell them like, well, just read the subtitles. And they go, no, it's moving too fast. And I think that's an unacceptable answer. You know, you have to be able to read. So, you know, but they love Marvel. They love the Marvel movies. So a good idea I thought was, you know, maybe instead of the only thing that is available for kids that are a little bit older than 6 that don't want to just read Donald Duck, and the only other option is Harry Potter, 800 page novel. Maybe let's give them a 100-page Hulk story. Let's give them a Spider-Man book. Let's give them an X-Men book. Let's give them something that they can actually, with characters that they know, with characters that they're interested in. Maybe this will get them interested in reading. Maybe they'll pick up some more Icelandic. I think it's a good way to keep the language alive, to get kids back into reading. And I just think these are really good stories, and I thought it was a fun idea to, be able to be the one to publish them.
You were that guy. You were the Icelandic Marvel Connect.
Yes.
Interesting. So, would you move to Hollywood?
Maybe. I've been there a couple of times, and I do prefer New York. But I mean, I definitely think like I will at least do like a year in LA just to see what would happen.
Because they like cults, and there's a lot of psychosis. Wouldn't you like to do stand up at like the Laugh Factory or whatever?
I would, yes. I would really love to do that. Last time I was in LA, I was the open mic scene in LA and Germany are very similar in the fact that in Iceland, I'm too privileged. In Iceland, you can just show up and you get a spot. Like if you show up, especially if you're not from Iceland, if you're like, hey, I'm from New York, I'm only here for 2 more days, can I do a spot? Like you were on the lineup. But when I was doing Germany the other day, and I just wanted to do, and when I was in LA, I was like, I'm just gonna show up. And no, you can't do that. You like,
no way.
You have to show up an hour early, and you have to sign up. And even if you sign up, there's there's a lineup, and you might not even make it. So the last time I was in LA, I tried, but I didn't succeed. So yeah, I definitely have to do the Laugh Factory once.
Wouldn't you love to do the Joe Rogan Experience too?
Oh yeah, I would love to. But I would assume I would have to become somebody first.
That's a safe assumption.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I'd love to talk to Joe about his work in news radio. That's one of my all-time favorite sitcoms.
Pardon me?
Joe Rogan did a sitcom called News Radio in the 90s.
Oh, I don't know that one. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it's really funny.
He's a funny guy. Mm-hmm. So you lived in Berlin for a period of time. What were you doing there? What can you say about the art life there?
Oh, the art life is pretty cool. I really love the Salvador Dali Museum. I'm a big Dali fan.
Yeah.
I really love surrealism, and and the art scene and comedy scene is definitely happening.
Mm,
I don't think it's I'm again, I might be very biased. I do think I do still prefer Iceland, but
right.
I think Berlin is just like it's like a bigger place. It has more variety, but I don't think it's necessarily better.
Oh, okay.
Again, I was probably just my bias. But
Fair enough.
when I go to like an art show, art gallery here, and when I go to a comedy club here, it's smaller, but I feel that there's more quality control. If that makes
Mm,
sense. And maybe
sure.
because it is smaller.
All right. Yeah, I did actually see that Dali exhibit. I didn't go in though. It's
Oh, it was great. Like if you next time
uh,
you're in Berlin, definitely check it out.
it's by like Potsdam Platz. It was
Yes.
it looks cool, but I didn't make time. I did like the Holocaust Memorial and like the Berlin Wall and like the obvious things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Dali's very cool. You always catch a vibe from Dali.
Oh yeah, for sure. Actually, I went to the East German Museum, and I bought a piece of the Berlin Wall.
Oh,
Yeah.
I ate like a
I think
pebble
it's
from the
super
Berlin
interesting.
Wall.
What?
I ate a pebble from the Berlin Wall,
You did?
like a very small piece of rock.
So the
So
one small piece of communism still resides in you.
exactly, it's
I
been
love it.
digested. I pooped it out. It was beautiful. All right, so do you still do stuff for Troma, and is this a bond for life?
For sure. Yeah, yeah. I'll never stop doing stuff for Troma. Uh, that's I'll yeah. They have me till the end. That's for sure. I'm currently doing a documentary for them called "Brown is the Warmest Color,"
Oh, okay.
which is the behind the scenes. I worked on the last couple of behind the scenes documentaries for Troma. I helped. I was one of the people that worked on a movie called Two Girls One Duck, which is
Mm,
the behind the scenes movie of Return to Nukem High, which was just released recently on Blu-ray. And
nice.
I'm the editor, the main editor, and the director for Brown is the Warmest Color, which is the behind the scenes of Shakespeare's Shitstorm. And the
Oh my.
latest version of that is 2 hours. And I just got some, because everyone's in quarantine, everyone has time to watch.
Hmm.
I've gotten my notes and I know what to do to make the next version of it.
Very lovely, very psychedelic, and they always have great titles for their documentaries,
Oh
such
yeah,
as "Farts of Darkness" and "Rashamoron." Those are my
yeah,
two favorites.
they're fucking great. So yeah,
Great
it's
references.
and we I also worked on Occupy Can, which
Oh
was
yes.
which
How
was
did that go? I heard that was chaotic.
yes, it was very chaotic, and they just got a new editor for the movie, so hopefully it will be out soon. But it's our journey filming, our journey. It's documenting our journey in Cannes in 2013 and 2017 when we're premiering Return to Nukem High Volume One and Volume Two, and 2013 was like. It was very fun. It was very like reminiscent. If you've seen All the Love You Can, the
Yeah, great
2002 Can
movie.
documentary, yeah,
Yeah.
the 2013 experience was very much like that. It was just we were just running amok. We were
Hmm.
spewing fake blood on people. We were just being assholes, drunken assholes. 2017 is very much more somber because every time we went out, the cops would just harass us and stop us. Uh,
Oh.
yeah, because it was during the sort of it's a weird thing to say. It was during like the terrorist season.
Oh.
So they had all these rules that, no protests. And so if we had signs that thought we were protesting, no masks because you might be like an ISIS member if you're wearing a mask apparently. But these are the rules they set to us because there were people like Disney had Pirates of the Caribbean people there. They weren't even working with Disney. They were just cosplayers. But those guys were allowed to have real swords and guns and have masks on. But if Troma went outside, we got stopped. I got personally stopped 6 times by the police. Once when we were just walking, we were gonna get something to eat. Like we'd done our thing for the day, and me and a couple other guys were gonna get something to eat. And I wasn't allowed in the restaurant, but the cops stopped me because I was wearing a Troma T-shirt.
Oh, puke. Wow.
So they obviously had some animosity against Troma more so than the other people. But yeah, so we weren't allowed to do anything. And like when we in 2013 we did this zombie crawl thing, where something we do in Doug Sackman, who's one of the main Troma people, he does it in New York City every year. This zombie crawl instead of a zombie walk, where people dress up as zombies and they sort of walk from one place to the next. And we did that in Cannes in 2013. It went really well. And during when we did that, I played a damsel in distress. I put on a dress and I got eaten by the zombies, and like it was a big show and really like drew people to what us and what we were doing. And when we did it in 2017, we specifically talked to the cops. Like, we're gonna do this. Can we do this? And the police chief said yes. And then we did it. We dressed up as zombies. We walked for 5 minutes, and then police, like SWAT members, showed up with like machine guns and put a stop to it.
Wow.
Yeah, like even after we've gotten specific permission to do this, they still shut us down like 5 minutes in.
Wow.
So yeah, I don't think I'm going back to Cannes, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's what I read on social media. Like, Troma is finished with Cannes.
Yeah, that was sort of the nail in the coffin for all of us.
That's unfortunate. Well, maybe you can do it in Berlin.
Oh yeah, yeah, because we actually, one of the things I did for Lloyd was I sent him because they wanted to really get Shakespeare Shitstorm is going to be like it's Lloyd Kaufman's swan song. It's gonna be like this.
Really?
It's really good, and it might be his final film, and we're all really proud of it. Like, it's like a really good film. So
awesome.
One of the things that I did was it's beautifully shot, and it's a really fun story, and it's just it's gonna be a masterpiece, I think. So one of the things we did is I helped them collect every single film festival, like not just genre film festivals, but like real film festivals. Because the idea is we're gonna, really do the festival circuit. Like, this movie's gonna go everywhere. Of course, yeah, it really should. So, but of course, the Corona thing is sort of put a stop for every premiere. But I did mention Berlin. Like, we should go. We should take the movie to Berlin and all that. So, are you still in Berlin?
I was just there for the festival.
All right. So yeah, the idea is the movie is finished now, I think. So the moment we can start premiering movies again, because I think every movie premiere is sort of postponed right now.
Yeah, it is.
The idea is to get it out there in every festival that will take it, and yeah, Berlin is definitely one of them. The Paris one, we're just gonna take it everywhere. And I'm gonna definitely, my ego won't allow me to stay home when we do that. I'll definitely. Because when we did the Return to Nukem High premieres in Finland, that's close enough that I was like, yeah, I'm not missing that. So I showed up and did the Q&A and stuff. So if they're premiering Troma movies in Europe, I'm definitely one of the guys in the background, either wearing the Toxie mask or just standing around.
All right, well, that's exciting, and thank you for keeping us up to date on everything traumatic. Bjarni, I want to thank you for your time. Before I let you go, what are you up to for quarantine season?
I'm using this time to finish everything that I can. I'm finishing this documentary, translating the next X-Men book, really using the time.
Good. Stay productive, brother.
Will do. Same to you, sir.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.